right. Today we have the head baseball coach of Alabama University, Mr. Elliott Jones. Elliott, give me a quick background of what your childhood was like growing up, where you're from, and what kind of child you were like.
Got you, man. I appreciate you guys having us, Todd. For sure, it's a great honor to be a part of this great movement you guys have going on. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from Shreveport, Louisiana. And for those who are not familiar with where that's located, that's probably northwest of Louisiana, the top of the boot. And that's where I grew up. I come from a single parent background. My mother raised me and my brother up until recently, man. I tell people all the time, man, your parents never stop raising you just because you become an adult. I lost my mom back in November this past year. But like I said, growing up was very, very challenging because you had myself and they had my older brother who's actually in collegiate sports as well, who's an assistant basketball coach at Grambling State. So we had to sacrifice. we come from a single parent background where we were both active in multiple sports growing up, and of course now that today. The travel ball and AAU ball is extremely expensive now. We didn't have that back when I came up. And my mom took she sacrificed. She sacrificed a lot of her time and a lot of the finances she did have to make sure that she invested in us to become better men in society. I was able to earn a baseball scholarship at Southern University. And so I kind of invested back and sacrificed it to help her out on giving to us as younger kids growing up. And so that's a little bit about myself. Played 4 years at Southern under Coach Kadar, and then I actually had an opportunity to graduate in education. And I made it on the point before I graduated. I kind of knew what I wanted to do. So I had already kind of made that challenge and that process of getting into education because I knew I wanted to give back to the youth in being a teacher and a coach. And so that's how I kind of got my career started after graduating from Southern and returning back to Shreveport, Louisiana, where I started my coaching career at a small school in a black neighborhood of Green Oaks High School. And so that's where I kind of started my coaching career and just was blessed, honestly, with an opportunity to return to the college level at such a young age, man. And so Coach Kadar allowed me to join his staff again within being removed from the program, probably not even 6 months, and being able to make that transition from high school to collegiate. And I said, to this day, I appreciate him of that. Like I say, who knows where I would have been today had I not made those type of sacrifices and knew what I wanted to do growing up.
What do you think Coach Kadar saw in you that made him say, you know what, Elliott would be a good addition to my staff?
I tell you this all the time. Me and him laugh about it to this day. It was tougher playing for him than it was coaching with him because he was just such an old school guy. And when we were there in the mid to late 2000s, he was in his 60s already. He had already enjoyed success. And so he wasn't going to change much for us. And so we had to make sure that we changed for him. I think one of the characteristics that stood out for me was being a leader was in my DNA. I was one of the freshmen that came in my freshman class that had the opportunity to start as a true freshman and give leadership skills that other upperclassmen probably didn't give all the time. I was very vocal. And I think that stood out to him, and knowing that he needed someone young at the time to kind of give that relation to the players that was coming in after me. And he knew that I would make the sacrifice for him.
Now, being a vocal leader, you have leaders that are sometimes you have ones that are vocal, then you have others that aren't vocal, then you have guys that aren't that good that don't put in all the work that are vocal. Then you have guys that do all the work and aren't vocal. How do you balance being vocal, having people follow you, and still doing what you're supposed to do, even if you're not the best on the team, and being a leader?
I think it just becomes it's a really, really unique situation. It takes a special person to be able to balance the two, and not always be afraid to fail. I think I tell people all the time, adversity is a gift. And I tell my players this today: if you can overcome the adversity and appreciate the adversity, then it makes little things a little more easier to deal with, and then you can always kind of make the adjustment you need to make, because the real world of life, man, life is not going to all come perfect. You're going to have some aches and bruises, so you got to be able to make the adjustment. Sometime in coaching, you got to make it instinctively. You have to make the decision before it actually happens. And so I think that's what people have to fail to realize. We have to really make the adjustment and not be afraid of the outcome.